Behringer gets a lot of flack for announcing products years before they ever hit the shelf, and rightly so. But in this case, I think KORG has them beat. Hi, I'm Zach Marr from Alamo Music here in San Antonio, Texas. You can find us online at alamomusic.com. If you haven't already, hit the subscribe button, turn on your notifications. This is our Alamo Sound Lab channel where we talk about all things music tech related. And today we're talking about the much anticipated, long overdue KORG Drumlogue. And really, this piece was announced, I think, in January of 2020. So it makes it a full 3 years before shipments are really starting to hit. I think some have started hitting in December worldwide. We got our first just this past week. And it was really positively received when it was announced. There was a lot of excitement, but there's been a big gap between when it was announced and when it now is released. And there has also been a number of products released in the interim that make it, I think, less compelling to the synth and drum machine audience. So the question is, on the log series for KORG, there's been kind of two routes. There's been the mini log, which was a wild success and kind of cemented in the annals of synth history as a kind of modern classic. And then we had the prologue, which kind of was a flop and still is not really, the verdict is out on it. I think it's an underrated piece. We've made a video or two on it. But the log series, just from the virtue of the mini log, was a wild success. So the question is, where does the drum log fall into? Is it more in the prologue or the mini log category? And I think the answer is definitely in the prologue category. And let me talk about why. So I think when you design products, you can win on a couple of different parameters. The products that typically succeed, I think, either have high fun or high nostalgia or high musicality or high kind of simplicity or kind of just intuitiveness. And if you succeed on one of those kind of axes or all four, you have the recipe for kind of a best-selling product. For fun factors, you have things like the Mini Freak or the pocket operators. For musicality, you have and simpleness, really, things like the JU06 or all the Juno clones. They're just simple and easy to use and fun. For nostalgia, you have all these clones that are coming out from every manufacturer, and there's just guaranteed success built in. I think when you design an instrument around some of these other parameter or other axes, there's a couple other ones. You can pursue innovation, you can pursue complexity, uniqueness. Those are harder to create best-selling products around, and typically they attract, I think, the really hardcore enthusiasts or users, but not necessarily the broader audience because it typically limits how fun or how musical it may be just out of the box. And I think in the Drumlogue, you have a couple of issues that are going to prevent it from being a bestseller. I still think it's a really interesting product and very cool. What separates it, I think, from the kind of giant assortment of drum machines available in the market is its truly hybrid nature, and it really nods to all types of drum machine kind of sound origin. So it's got analog voices. It has digital engines producing sound. So you have like an FM engine in here. You have a couple synth virtual analog engines in here, and you also have sample-based sounds. So you get all three types that you find in drum machines, which is kind of rare to have all three in a unit. And it's at a lower price point, $600, kind of that mid price point. And you can layer them to create all sorts of different kind of timbres and drum kits. And really, I think that is at its core what's unique about it. In addition to that, they did the open. They have the SDK. I think they have basically a ability for users to create their own sound engines and kind of effects that aftermarket the community can create, and then you can upload into the instrument. You see that on the ProLog and the Minilog XD, which is really cool. But again, I think it's really niche. And again, it's pushing into the kind of innovative and complex side, which pulls back on the fun, intuitive side. And I would also say that it's not instantly an instrument that has a very narrow sweet spot. It's got a very large palette, and there's a lot of not sweet spots. And so I think because of those reasons, it's going to struggle a little bit. If you look at the comments from other synth videos or drum machine review videos, a lot of the commentary is not positive. It's very mixed. But I don't think that's because the instrument is not capable of generating a really positive reaction. I just think it's difficult. Even some of the best reviewers, Loop Pop and Bo Beats and a couple other ones that I've watched, they seem to struggle to find the inherent musical nature of this instrument and the musical beauty. And I'm not a better reviewer than any of those guys, so I will also probably struggle when I get into this and play a little bit for you. But I don't think it's because it's not there. I just think that they gave you a lot of different areas to pursue, and this is an instrument that will reward time spent with it, I think, more so than instruments that are just fun to play out of the box. I also think that since the announcement and the release, you have products like the RD9, which is really nice from Behringer, that kind of hit a really big desire in the drum machine marketplace. You have the Electron Syntec and a number of their products. So you have other drum machines that have come out that play in this space and have really hit the kind of need for another drum machine for a lot of, I think, consumers. So will this one be a must-have for a lot of people? I don't know. If they bought an RD9, if they have a TR8S or TR6S with all the firmware updates, I don't know. Do they need another one? Is it different enough to create excitement? Time will tell. So let's take a listen, and I will do my best to kind of highlight what I think is musical and nice about the instrument. In the demo, I'm going to try and show, I think one of the things that's the most interesting about this unit is that you can create seemingly an infinite amount of kits from combining samples, the virtual analog instruments, and the analog voices. And so there's a lot of play to be had between pattern creation and kit creation. And I think a way to demonstrate that is if you use a program and then you switch the kits and you use the pattern and then you're switching through the kits, you can see how different it feels and how broad the spectrum of sounds this thing can create. And that's not even me getting into the kit and customizing the voices. Each voice, the analog voices have digital transients you can add, which really change the color. The digital voices, you can literally swap through a whole bunch of different samples. And then you have the analog VA stuff that you can switch a bunch of the parameters on. So there's a lot of tweaking and customization that invite deeper dives into the instrument. So let's take a listen. I'll conclude with some final thoughts. So there you have it, the KORG Drumlogue. Did my best there to pick out some patterns that I thought were nice and combine it with some kits that I also thought were nice. Didn't get super deep into any of the features. There's some really good videos out there that do a full overview of everything it's capable of. I think some of the cons that I see with this, it's not the easiest to, so the fun factor when you're playing with it and in a live kind of performance setting, it's not the easiest to really get in and modify things and kind of tweak the sound. It's a little bit more difficult than, I would say, even Arturia's stuff, which is not that difficult. It's actually high fun factor. People complain about the sound sometimes, but very fun. The TR-8S as well has got a lot of fun performance features, as does the Behringer stuff, like the RD9. This one is definitely not as fun as some of those instruments to get into. I think also there's some kind of clipping that goes on when you're playing with certain parts of the VA engine, and I think that probably firmware updates will fix that. But other than that, I think it's got its own tone. It's definitely not the Arturia sound, the Behringer sound, the Roland sound. It's not any of the Electron sound. It's very much its own thing. It's the KORG sound. Some people have said, is this a reimagination of the Electribe ER1? And I would say that I don't think it is, because the ER1, part of its magic is its simplicity and kind of charming intuitiveness. And this is definitely, maybe it's in the same lineage and borrows from it somewhat, but it definitely doesn't, I don't think, I mean, you could say that, but I don't think it's very meaningful to say that. One thing that I do think is another interesting point of exploration in this is the polyrhythms. It is fairly easy to program the polyrhythms, and it's designed to handle that well. It reminds me of some of the features they put into the wave state, the kind of the updated wave station. And there's also the ability to motion sequence across a bunch of different parameters, which again, I think is a really nice, you can do multi-lane, multi-feature motion sequencing, which I think you can create some really rich textures and sounds and drum patterns. So again, I think this instrument will, I don't know how well it's going to do in the marketplace. I think there's definitely people that are going to buy it. One, because they're KORG fans and they're Log fans, but also two, I think that it will reward people that go deep into it, and that hopefully there's some musician or artist somewhere that will really show what it's fully capable of. But I think until that happens, it might not have a great response, and it might just end up in the lineage of synths that time and drum machines that time forgot or kind of overlooked, and then maybe one day some musician will bring it out and it'll become this kind of like hidden jewel or masterpiece for a record or something. I don't know, just ad-libbing. What are your thoughts? What do you think it sounds like? Do you think it is going to be more successful, less successful? Would love to continue the conversation. Please, if you haven't hit the subscribe button, love to see you here again, and thanks for watching.